Hello and welcome. So, in the world of biopharma accounting, we're all pretty used to quantifying risks, right? Things like R&D costs and patent cliffs. But what if one of the biggest financial risks isn't even on the balance sheet? Today, we're going to explore a key sustainability metric that takes a massive hidden operational risk and turns it into concrete, reportable data. So let me ask you this. When you think about risk in biopharma, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it R&D failures? Clinical trial issues? Those are all huge for sure. But the biggest hidden risk? Well, it might be hiding in plain sight. That's right. It's not about creating the drug. It's all about the journey that drug and all its components take to finally get to the patient. This is where quality, safety, and ultimately shareholder value can be won or completely lost. Let's talk about the billion-dollar blind spot. And we call it that for a reason. Because a single failure in the supply chain doesn't just cause a small hiccup. No, it can have a massive, nine-figure impact on the bottom line. The fallout here is severe, and it has direct financial implications. I'm talking about lost revenue from supply disruptions, huge reputational damage that absolutely impacts shareholder value, and of course, the worst-case scenario, threats to patient safety. From an accounting perspective, each one of these isn't just a risk, it's a potential liability that has to be quantified and managed. So, how in the world does the industry manage this enormous risk? Well, it created a standard for its supply chains. Let's dive into the solution, the RX360 Audit Program. To put it simply, RX360 is a nonprofit group that created a shared audit program. So instead of every company having to audit every single supplier on its own, which would be a nightmare, they can use these standardized third-party audits to verify quality and safety. It basically creates a common language for supply chain integrity. Okay, so how do we turn this big idea into a number you can actually put in a report? Well, the metric is broken down into two key parts. We're going to start with the first part, which is all about looking inward at the company's own operations. You can think of this metric as looking at two sides of the same coin. First, there are your own facilities. Is your own house in order? And second, there are your tier one suppliers, the direct partners you rely on every day. You've got to assess both. So the key here for part one is a really simple calculation. It just asks, out of all the facilities that you own or operate, what percentage of them are participating in a program like RX360 or a similar third-party audit? It's really a measure of your own internal discipline. For example, seeing a score like 80%, well, that tells investors a really powerful story. It signals a strong internal audit culture and that you're serious about quality control. For you as an accountant, this translates to lower internal operational risk, which means fewer potential write-downs or unexpected costs from things going wrong internally. All right, now for the second piece of the puzzle, which looks outward. It's one thing to control your own facilities, but what about those key suppliers who depend on day in and day out? Before we go any further, let's just be crystal clear on what we mean by Tier I suppliers. These are your immediate, direct partners, the companies you buy from, the ones you're sending purchase orders to. They are the very first link in your external supply chain. The logic here is exactly the same as it was for your internal facilities. What percentage of your Tier 1 suppliers are taking part in an approved audit program? This number gives you a really clear window into the external risk that's embedded directly in your cost of goods sold. So if you see a number like 60% for your suppliers, it might tell a totally different story than that 80% internal score. It could be a signal that, hey, while your own house is in order, there's still a pretty significant risk hanging out there with your key partners. And that might be a major red flag for your procurement and quality teams. Now, for all the accountants watching, this part is critical. The standard allows you to limit the scope of the supplier metric. You can focus on just the suppliers that account for 90% or more of your company's spending. This is the principle of materiality in action. It's what makes this metric practical and focuses your attention where it matters most, on the suppliers that pose the biggest potential risk to your business. So, we have these two percentages, one for what's happening inside and one for what's happening outside. But they are so much more than just numbers on a page. This is data that actually drives decisions, and that's why it really matters to you. Just look at how different people use this data. As an accountant, you're recording the costs of these audits. But for an investor, a high percentage is a great sign of ESG strength and lower risk. And for an external auditor, it's all about verifying these third-party reports for compliance. It's a single metric that provides valuable but different insights for each role. And that right there is the ultimate power of what we've just talked about. This metric takes the sprawling, complex, and frankly pretty scary risk of supply chain failure, and it boils it down to a clear, comparable, and quantifiable measure of performance. It is a perfect example of how ESG data is becoming absolutely central to financial reporting. So, I'll leave you with this thought. We've seen that a simple percentage can tell a rich story about risk, about discipline, and about resilience. The real question is, what story are your company's numbers telling? And are you listening?